Welcome to another chilling episode of A Murder a Day. Today, we delve into the life of Dorothe Puente, a seemingly sweet old lady who turned her home into a house of horrors. Join us as we explore her dark secrets, the murders she committed, and the chilling tale of deceit that shocked a community.
I used to be a very good person at one time.
Mrs. Montalo, what can you tell us about the murders? Were you involved in any way? Excuse me.
Dorothea Helen Gray was born on January 9, 1929 in Redlands, California. Her life was marked by tragedy and instability from a very young age. Dorothea was the sixth of 7 children in a deeply troubled family. Parents, Trudy May and Jesse James Gray, were alcoholics who provided little stability for their children. Tragedy struck early in Dorothea's life. When she was just 8 years old, her father died of tuberculosis. This loss was compounded when, 2 years later, her mother died in a motorcycle accident. Orphaned at the age of 10, Dorothea was sent to an orphanage, where she would remain until she was taken in by relatives. Her tumultuous upbringing left deep psychological scars. In her teens, Dorothea ran away from home and turned to a life of crime. She married for the first time at the age of 16, but the marriage was short-lived. Over the next few years, she would marry and divorce several times, each relationship ending in failure and further contributing to her instability. In the 1960s, Dorothea moved to Sacramento, where she began working as a caretaker for the elderly and disabled. She quickly gained a reputation for being a kind and caring individual, traits that would later mask her true nature. In 1980, Dorothea purchased a 2-story Victorian house at 1426 F Street in Sacramento. She transformed it into a boarding house for the elderly and disabled. The house, with its welcoming facade, became a sanctuary for those in need, but for some, it would become their final resting place. Despite her seemingly benevolent demeanor, Dorothea had a dark side. She was driven by greed and a desire for control. She would target her tenants, particularly the elderly and those receiving Social Security benefits, and slowly poison them with a cocktail of medications. As time went on, several of Dorothea's tenants began to disappear under mysterious circumstances. Ruth Monroe, a widow in her late 60s, moved into Dorothea's boarding house seeking companionship and a fresh start. However, she quickly became a target. Authorities later discovered that Ruth was likely poisoned, with evidence suggesting that Dorothea used a lethal combination of medications to ensure her death. After Ruth's death, Dorothea forged her signature on a series of checks, stealing Ruth's Social Security benefits and other assets. This act of betrayal showcased not only her greed, but also her willingness to eliminate anyone who might jeopardize her scheme. Malcolm Mackenzie, another elderly tenant, vanished under suspicious circumstances shortly after Ruth. He was a World War II veteran, and like Ruth, came to Dorothea seeking a place to live. Friends and family began to grow concerned when Malcolm stopped contacting them. When investigators began looking into his disappearance, they found disturbing patterns in the lives of Dorothea's other tenants, leading them to suspect foul play. Malcolm's body was ultimately found buried in the backyard of Dorothea's home, alongside the remains of other victims. Like Ruth, it is believed that he was also poisoned, although the precise details of his murder remain unclear. Several other tenants also disappeared during this time. Investigators discovered their bodies buried in her garden with indications that they too had been poisoned.
You know what I heard? I heard, hey, Dorothea over at 1426 F Street, killing people and burying them in her backyard. How do you explain the body in the backyard?
I don't
2.5 feet down, with clothing and everything with it. How?
When you find out how old it is and see that I didn't have anything to do with that,
Dorothea?
sir, I don't know anything
I'm going to
about
ask you right now again. Are there any other bodies
No.
in your backyard?
Not that I didn't even know that one was there.
Dorothea was cunning in her methods. She often claimed her tenants had moved away or died of natural causes, using her position as a caregiver to deflect suspicion. Her charming demeanor allowed her to manipulate those around her, keeping the authorities at bay for far longer than one would expect. It was this combination of charm and ruthlessness that allowed Dorothea Puente to operate undetected, turning her home into a graveyard for the vulnerable and the unsuspecting. In November 1988, the police received a tip that led them to excavate the backyard of Dorothea's boarding house. What they uncovered shocked the community. Human remains buried beneath the garden. Dorothea was arrested on suspicion of murder. As investigators dug deeper, they found more bodies, leading to her being charged with multiple counts of murder. The bodies were identified as her missing tenants, each one revealing a grim story of betrayal and murder. The authorities were stunned by the extent of her crimes, as the number of victims continued to rise. Dorothea's trial began in 1990 and captured national attention. Her defense claimed she was a victim of circumstance, arguing that she was merely a caretaker who had been misunderstood. The prosecution, however, painted a very different picture. They presented evidence of forgery, witness testimonies, and the chilling discovery of multiple bodies buried in her backyard. The jury heard how Dorothea had systematically poisoned her tenants to steal their money. Testimonies from former tenants and neighbors painted a damning picture of Dorothea as a manipulative and calculating murderer. On March 10, 1992, Dorothea Puente was found guilty of 3 counts of murder and sentenced to 2 life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. Dorothea Puente's story serves as a haunting reminder of how trust can be exploited and how appearances can be deceiving. Once considered a beloved member of the community, she became one of California's most notorious serial killers. The case prompted changes in regulations surrounding elderly care and boarding houses, emphasizing the need for vigilance in protecting the most vulnerable members of society. Dorothea Puente spent the rest of her life in prison, where she died in 2011. Her legacy remains a chilling testament to the darkness that can hide behind a seemingly kind and caring facade. Thank you for joining us on this chilling journey through the life of Dorothea Puente. If you enjoyed this episode of A Murder a Day, be sure to subscribe, like, and share for more gripping true crime stories. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.